Awakened Living is a 21st century movement for people who consider themselves spiritual but not religious, who have a deep hunger for connected community and a divine impulse for personal and global transformation. Our mission is to encourage and inspire the awakening of human consciousness.
Welcome to Awakened Living TV. I'm your guest host tonight, Burke Halinovych, and I have the honor of interviewing your host, TJ Woodward. I'm excited to talk about your new book that's coming out, Conscious Recovery.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. And of course, it was so much fun interviewing you, and now we've turned the tables. So How exciting is that?
Yeah, so let's get into it.
Okay.
So Conscious Recovery, I'm familiar with Conscious Being, your first book, and we've obviously had a lot of conversations. Where did this idea come from?
So I've been working in the field of addiction treatment for over a decade, and I've been in recovery myself for 30 years. And the idea really for conscious recovery came to me through the development of my work in the addiction treatment field and looking at addiction through a spiritual lens, through a holistic lens, and recognizing that so much of the treatment that's out there, so many of the modalities of treatment out there really focus on the symptoms and the behaviors without getting down to some of the deeper root causes. So I've really been in meditation, if you will, about do I have a book to write? Do I have a method to create? And the answer about 2 years ago came to me, yes, I want to offer my experience of what it's like to treat addiction and to view addiction through the spiritual lens. So that's how it came to be.
Nice. So obviously, this comes from a lot of your own experience and seeing what's worked and what hasn't worked within the field, within the rooms, within your own recovery process. If you could break it down and tease out what are the components that make up this method and this book and this message that you're trying to put out.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely, I can. The book is broken down into 3 parts. First part is the roots of addiction, the root causes of addiction, and then it's breaking the cycle of addiction, and then the great remembering, as I call it. And conscious recovery and the conscious recovery method is really looking at addiction through a different lens. And again, I know I'm not the only person looking at it through this lens, but there's an old paradigm in addiction treatment. That is, there's a disease model, and there is an approach that focuses on addiction as the problem and the person that is addicted as the addict, right? And so in my years of being in New Thought, it just doesn't resonate for me. And in my years of being in my own practice and my own experience, I don't want to continue to identify myself as being broken. I don't want to identify myself as being broken at all. And a decade ago, when I started working in this field full-time doing spiritual care, I began to recognize the power of viewing the person as a whole and perfect person in the midst of any of the behavior. So conscious recovery is dedicated, both the method and the book, to looking beyond the symptoms and into the root causes, which, as I said, is the first part of the book. What I mean by that is that addiction's never been a problem. It's not even a problem. It's a solution to something. And the only problem, if you will, is that it has quit working. We would call it maladaptive in the field. In everyday life, we say that crap ain't working anymore, and it's time to try something new.
Right. So what are you offering up? You're saying we're going to try something new. You've pointed out the disease model, the disease concept, some of the more older methods in which we've approached the addiction field, the addicted individual. What is the spin or the different perspective that you're providing for your clients, and how does the method that you've laid out show up for your clients, or what does it allow them to do within your process?
Well, I think the fundamental piece is that I don't have the answers. The person who, each of us in our own life, has inner wisdom, an innate sense of, that's the true definition of holistic. There is something within me that always wants to heal, that always wants to be in balance. There's a part of me that always wants to return to that original perfection. You and I, on our last show or a couple of shows ago, talked about coming into the world as that innocent, pure spiritual being. Conscious recovery and the conscious recovery method acknowledges that that is still within each and every person. There's a place within each of us that is unharmed and unharmable. Conscious recovery and the conscious recovery method doesn't come with answers. It comes with a perspective and some questions, if you will, to help us get back to that inner wisdom. So as a clinician working in this field, when I'm meeting with a client, I don't come with my perspective and my answers. I really want to explore with them what are the questions that I can ask, what's the space that I can create for someone to really look deeper within, and then how do we create a space together? How do we co-create a space that allows them to get in touch with and cultivate a relationship with that innate wisdom, that deeper truth of who they are.
So you believe this wisdom is already embedded in the individual?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I couldn't agree more. I get excited talking about this because these are the side conversations that, the select folks inside the field have, but they're always offshoots because everything has to be evidence-based, and there's, for good reason, a lot of rigorous types of ways that we need to roll out these treatment modalities. But the conversation and the question, I view the modalities that are tried and tested as true as the answers, but you want to live in the question.
Yeah.
And so can you highlight, you've brought it up twice now about the question and living in the question, what that means to you and how it shows up in your method?
Absolutely. So to be really tangible about it, in the book, at the end of each chapter, there are a series of interactive processes and questions designed to help people really reflect. And that's true of my first book too, Conscious Being. A lot of people read it and said, well, it was really great, but how does that apply to my life? So with Conscious Recovery, my good friend and colleague, Dr. Adriana Popescu, and I have co-authored these addendums, if you will, at the end of each chapter that will help you, what you just read in the chapter, really apply to your life. And it's applied through questioning, not through answers. So at the end of each chapter, there's actually 5 interactive processes that you can do to help you really bring the concepts to life. And then there's 20 journaling questions. So I had someone look at this book that said this is a 1-year process, easily, right? You can easily take a month doing the 5 processes, the 20 reflective questions. And again, the questions they're designed to help someone get in touch with what's going on at a much deeper level. So moving beyond all the symptoms and what the problem is, and really looking more deeply within. What would happen if I start to question my basic framework of life? What would happen if I started to look at my core assumptions? What would happen if I started to create a space where I allowed some of the unconscious patterns, beliefs, and ideas to emerge so that I can begin to consciously choose rather than having the unconscious running the show? That's fundamental unconscious recovery. In its name, we're bringing things out of the unconscious. In other words, we're not on autopilot anymore. We're going to recognize there's these things that have been really deep within me, whether it's unresolved. Again, this is to go down to the 3 root causes: unresolved trauma, spiritual disconnection, and toxic shame. They're running the show. I believe it's Carl Jung that says when they're trapped in the unconscious, they're running our life, and we call it fate.
Yep.
It's only when we bring it into conscious awareness that we can start to choose. So that's fundamental in conscious recovery.
That was beautiful. Yeah, I like the tie-in with Jung. Fate is predetermined and destiny is self-actualized. And that's what I hear when I read your literature and we have these conversations, is that you can change the narrative. That there are unresolved stories that are happening in your life that are running amok. And so with these 3 core elements that you bring up, where do you see people, on one hand, struggling the most, and where do you see the breakthroughs?
Well, struggling the most is this stuff all trapped in the unconscious. In my work, certainly in my own early recovery, and in my work with clients, the fundamental piece is that it's so scary to be right here. Many of us, if not all of us, were taught not to feel, that it's not safe to feel. It's not safe to be who we are. We grow up in family systems that are at very best unconscious and sometimes out and out abusive in terms of the essential spiritual self. We get taught from a very early age that it's not okay to be us. A lot of that is unconscious and it's nonverbal, right? A child has, a meltdown of some sort, and what do we try to do? Get the child to stop, don't feel that, take this candy, take this distraction, or, as we talked about in one of our shows, go to your room until you stop feeling. So there's abandonment, there's that attachment that is really needed, and the fundamental attachment that's needed is an ability to connect with ourself and our own emotions. Early in life, what a child really needs to hear is, what are you feeling? It's okay to feel that. You're safe here, and I'm not leaving you. I'm going to be here for you. So there's a whole section in my book, Conscious Recovery, about self-parenting, which we can talk more about. Certainly that's not my own unique perspective, but I offer just sort of my take on that.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the method?
My favorite part of the method is unlearning. And the first part of the book, as I said, is the 3 root causes. And then when we get into breaking the cycle, there's 3 chapters in each section, 3 sections. The first chapter is creating safety. How do I create external safety, internal safety, in order to begin doing this deeper work, which to me is unlearning. And we've touched on it, so to go deeper with it. What are the ideas, the beliefs, the stories, the narrative of my life that is creating what I call reality? When I believe I'm broken, I'm going to experience the world is broken. I mean, that myself and the world is broken, and hurt people hurt people, right? Yeah. We're projecting. So the fundamental core of conscious recovery is, how do we begin to question all the core beliefs, ideas, and assumptions? Question those core false beliefs that are informing what we call reality.
Wow. So when you're questioning someone's, how can I say this? I'll go back. You speak a lot about holding space for someone to be the perfect and whole being that they are. When you have someone questioning their belief system or their inherited belief system or perspective, how do you effectively hold space for someone to feel safe within that process of unlearning and unraveling to get back to that original condition that you speak of?
Well, I thank you for that, because that's why I start with creating safety first. Many people that are coming out of addiction, if not most people, if not all people, don't have internal and external safety in their lives, right? A lot of us have come from chaotic family systems or systems where chaos is the norm, and being safe, really being safe, which is being seen for who and what you are, is not something that's been modeled. And when we're really terrified and afraid to be with ourselves, we don't really have the safety to begin to unlearn. It shows up in what we call anxiety, right? I have so much anxiety right now because I can't be with myself. So creating safety is a first important step. And the way I do that with clients, and we did a whole show on this, is I do my own work. Because if I haven't created within myself the ability to work on some of the shadow, some of the deeper core beliefs that are trapped in the shadow, some of that, the parts of myself that I want to abandon, going back to that was modeled for us. I abandoned myself very early in life. At age 7, I remember like it was yesterday, closing off, shutting down, and building a wall. And I remember a physical sensation of actually really going within and building that armor. And it wasn't until I found drugs and alcohol at 13 or 14 that I had relief. So those years, 7 through 14, walking around for those years feeling separate from, feeling less than, feeling not good enough, feeling afraid, shut down, not okay to be me, that's very painful. Drugs and alcohol brought relief. I got sober at 20, and so from 20 until now, so 30, 31 plus years of my own recovery has been this unraveling process, and safety has been an important piece. And I remember the first time I ever really felt safe in the world was when I met my first spiritual teacher, Mary Helen Brownell. She held that space for me of someone who saw me and loved me for all of it. She didn't just love the parts that I wanted to show. She was willing to love the shadow, love all aspects, so much compassion, so much love. I dedicate my book and really my life to her as one of the first primary teachers. She demonstrated for me the power of creating the space, not by anything she said, but by doing it for me and with me. I recognized the power of that.
Wow. It's beautiful that you had that experience. And I can see that it's reflective in your work that you do, that you would like to position yourself to be that person in other people's lives, and what an honor that is. How do you take someone who's spiritually disconnected and start to, by use of creating safety and understanding and acknowledgement, fuse that spiritual disconnection back together?
Well, I'll say it this way. It can take a lifetime and it can happen in an instant.
I love that.
So the first step for me is to always know that the person sitting with me, and I try to do this in my writing as well, the person reading this book, there's always a place within each of us that knows the original perfection, no matter how damaged we feel. So it starts with a basic knowing that within each of us we have that spark, that seed, that place that is spiritually connected, and that the spiritual disconnection is a story or a strategy, a belief system, and that comes through trauma. One of my favorite, and I know you and I have already talked about this, and I bring it up in my book, but Don Miguel Ruiz in his book, The Four Agreements, calls it the domestication of the human, because when we domesticate an animal, we call it breaking them or breaking their spirit. Yep. So the issue is it develops into toxic shame. So it's not going to serve me if you're meeting with me for the first time and you feel a lot of shame and a lot of disconnection for me to say, well, you know that you're whole and perfect in the midst of all of that. It's going to actually be something that I demonstrate. Yeah. And that is really just holding the space and beginning to question, where did you get this idea? Where did you get this belief? When did you first start believing that you're broken? Fundamental in my work is helping people get down to the core false beliefs that they're carrying, those really deep ones. Usually it's 2 or 3. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy. Everything stems from that. So helping someone get to a place where they recognize, wow, I really have been holding that. Therefore, it's coloring everything in my world. So I guess to answer your question, it's really, I hold the space for them in the moment maybe they're not ready to yet. And through that, something miraculous happens. Because it's not me, the ego me. It's when I'm able to be grounded in spirit and present for someone that they can start to begin to unravel those belief systems, ideas, and constructs that keep them limited. Yeah, it reminds me of Johari's window, that part of the parts of yourself that you're unwilling to see yourself that you need to have another person point out. That was a really nice explanation. Yeah, I like where you went with that. So you're a very integral part of our treatment community here in the Bay Area, and you work at a lot of different capacities. Where do you see the conscious recovery method in your book being implemented, and how are you putting it into action in the community? Wow, I didn't expect that. Thank you. My hope and my intention for Conscious Recovery, the book, is that anyone who reads it might resonate with a different approach. If someone's walking around feeling like they're broken, there are treatment modalities that almost confirm that re-traumatize, that cause more shame. I've watched people, for example, get into certain types of treatment and they're told to go make an amend and only look at their side. If they haven't worked through the trauma yet, that can be re-traumatizing. Absolutely. And I'm not denying the power of the spiritual principle of making amends. It's really powerful, and my book is offering a little different and hopefully a lot different approach to recognize that in the midst of all this, that you are essentially whole and perfect. So that's my intention for the book, to reach as many people as possible, that they might pick it up and hold the energy of their own love, their own light, their own perfection. They're not broken. They're not damaged. Those are stories and beliefs and ideas. The book is not written like a textbook or like a novel. I mean, it's not written to be read through cover to cover and say that was a beautiful story. It's really designed to help someone walk through this unlearning process, how they create safety, how they create safe community. So my intention for the book is that someone will pick it up like this is a guide for living. Might take me a year, might take me 2 years, might take me a decade to work through this. On the other end of all these processes, that they'll have a transformation, and it's not really a transformation, it's really a remembering. Yeah. Oh yeah, I do know who I am. So that's my intention for the book. The Conscious Recovery Method is it's curriculum that I've created. My authenticity groups I've been doing for over a decade. Clients really love it. I've now created a 12-week curriculum based on the book, Conscious Recovery. My hope and my intention is that it can be in as many treatment programs as possible, that I can be a part of assisting clinicians in being trained on the Conscious Recovery method, which is I'm going to do my own deeper inner work. I'm going to see this person as whole and perfect. I'm no longer going to look at them as a diagnosis or a disease, but begin to look at them as a whole and perfect spiritual being. I think that if you look at traditional recovery and the 12-step movement, there's spirituality in there. It's a little bit different brand of spirituality. So when I talk about the spiritual room, I'm not talking about helping someone find a higher power, although that can be really important for people. I'm really talking about creating a space for them to connect with the original perfection. My biggest dream would be that every treatment program in this world would be looking at conscious recovery and how we begin to unravel the old treatment paradigm of looking at someone as broken. So my biggest dream would be for Oprah to be watching right now and say, let's talk about conscious recovery and get this in every treatment program in the world, so that we can start shifting not only the dialogue, but the experience of how we're treating individuals. We're not treating a disease. We're not treating someone that's broken. We're helping someone return to their original perfection.
Right. So you gave me a nice segue into my next question, or where you were leading me. And that is, we've seen other things come around like DBT that's really affected the language we use, the way that we scan for clients, taking more of a skill-based approach than a psychoeducational approach. And so if the conscious recovery method wasn't implemented to every treatment program in the world, it absolutely may influence the way that clinicians are showing up and doing the work that they're doing. How do you see that transpiring as this becomes more of a packaged, tangible entity within our field?
One of the most powerful things I know now is to say I don't know. And if I were to tell you right now I knew what that would look like, I would be delusional. My knowing comes from a deeper spiritual place, and that is not so much how it gets rolled out, how it gets packaged, how the language changes, but there's a deep innate knowing that what my own life's journey and how I went through the darkness, both in my addiction, in my early life, healing from sexual trauma, being a gay kid in the 1970s in Indiana, that kind of trauma, having my entire life fall apart at 20 years sober, losing everything, being bankrupt, having some legal situations that were very deeply painful for me, what looked like betrayal, everything that I've gone through in my life, and been able to use that as fuel for my transformation. I recognized about a little over a decade ago that my life's calling now was to assist this transformation on the planet in whatever form it wants to emerge. So I want to be a vessel for that, and I'm knowing that however long I'm blessed to be here on this planet, the rest of my life is dedicated to this. I would love for us to stop seeing our clients as broken. It actually is very emotional for me because we know that in the quantum field, the observer has the effect. And when I'm looking at this person and I'm using terms like treatment resistant or med seeking or non-compliant or even a mental health diagnosis, I'm creating a space where they're not going to be able to fully access the truth of who they are. When I come in and I look at someone, regardless of their diagnosis, regardless of their trauma history, regardless of their addiction history, how many times they've been to treatment, when I see that they have within them everything that they need to heal, that doesn't mean that they can do it on their own, but they have within them that spark of divinity that can actually bring them back to that place. That's what I'm excited about. And I just want in some small way to be a part of that that's happening on the planet. So that's my answer. I'm going to say, Spirit, use me.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that it's just refreshing to hear. It's a great perspective, and we're running out of time, believe it or not. So is there anything else that you would like the community to know about the work you're doing, the method, the book, the release? Your last thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so grateful for Awakened Living TV and for the opportunity to speak with you on the show, and again, our viewers who have followed us for the last 3 years. And a huge thank to Burke for being in this conversation. What I want to say in closing, if you or someone you know is struggling with an addiction, my intention is that conscious recovery can help. Please go to consciousrecovery.com. My book will be out hopefully January 1st of 2018. So if you're watching this after that time, the book is available. What I want to close with is simply this. You do have within you the ability to remember the deeper truth of who and what you are. You are worthy of a life filled with love, connection, and compassion. And you deserve a life. You deserve the fullest, most dynamic, most incredible life. You were born here for a specific reason, and that reason is to awaken and to remember that greater truth. So thank you so much, and thank you so much for being part of this journey for me of this awakening that's happening on the planet and conscious recovery. So again, for more information, consciousrecovery.com. Thank you so much, and good night.